Top of the SportsMax Zone for this Thursday. Runs continuing to flow for the West Indies in warm-up for the two-match test series, which starts on the 2nd of December against New Zealand on the opening day of their second practice match, a four-day fixture against New Zealand A at the John Davis Oval in Queenstown. The Caribbean side piled up 353 for 3, with Craig Brathwaite scoring a massive 100. Here's Ricardo Chambers with a roundup.
Another solid day with the bat for the West Indians. Surely the selectors will be pleased with the effort of the openers. Left-hander John Campbell spending much needed time in the middle. The Jamaican stroking 8 fours in his 45 from 62 deliveries. He and Craig Brathwaite put on 111 for the first wicket, but he might still be wondering how Blair Tickner got between bat and pad to disturb his middle stump. Darren Bravo, who scored 135 in the team's first warm-up match, continued his fine form. The Trinidadian, this time falling 7 short of a century, his 93 coming off 167 deliveries in his 3 hours and 41 minutes at the crease, which yielded a 189-run stand with Brathwaite. Shamar Brooks got 80 in game 1. This time at bat, he managed just 5, a well-timed shot picking out the square leg fielder. Craig Brathwaite though proved irremovable on the day, the Barbadian right-hander producing 183 not out from 262 deliveries with 14 fours and the day's only 6. Jermaine Blackwood also getting a start, ending on 19 not out. The West Indians 353 for 3 from 90 overs faced.
So a pretty solid display on the opening day of this test match by the West Indies frontline batsmen. And joining us now to discuss the efforts of Brathwaite and company, international cricket commentator Fazir Mohammed. Faz, great to have you on the SportsMax Zone once again. We had Tina Best on the show 2 or 3 days last week discussing, the team's preparation for the important matches coming up. Of course, the T20s early in the morning starting, and then the test match early December. But what do you make of what has happened so far, warm-up for the Windies?
First of all, let me apologize. I could never match Tino as far as the way he presents anything, but I'll try my best anyway. It's obviously encouraging. I mean, even though you'd want to say, look, being as pragmatic as possible without trying to sound overly pessimistic, you've got to recognize that these runs are not going to be as easily gotten when you get to the test match, because you're talking about different quality bowling, higher quality bowling, maybe different types of pitches, greener pitches, much more help for the seamers, Trent Bolt and company. So that will obviously have to be a consideration. But runs are runs. And given what we saw in the first warm-up with Darren Bravo leading the way and now Craig Brathwaite leading the way, there's nothing like getting runs under your belt. And the gentleman right close to you all, Wayne Lewis, is best positioned to give you the value of that, because you could do as much as you want in the nets and so on and feel it coming off the middle of the bat. But it's only when you're out in the middle in something resembling match conditions that, and you feel the runs coming off the ball coming off the bat nicely, or you're flowing, you're getting the singles and twos and so on. That helps you along. So every run helps, but again, they must always put it in perspective that is in preparation for a much tougher challenge.
Well, Fazir, I agree with you to a point. I'm hoping that they're not lowering the West Indies team into a false sense of security in terms of preparing some pretty flat pitches, and these guys are scoring a lot of runs. They're scoring runs in their sleep. But once the test match starts and that green top wicket, seaming around, ball all over the place flying, then it's a totally different kettle of fish. And I'm hoping that, the confidence that they would have garnered or generated from, spending some time in the middle will help them when the test match starts. So when it gets very difficult, they'll remember that they are in good nick still, because they are coming into the test match with some runs. I'm just hoping that Craig Brathwaite and Darren Bravo have not been scoring all their runs, and then they run out of runs when the test match starts. So, I'm very hopeful. I've always been very positive about West Indies cricket, and therefore I'm an incurable optimist with West Indies cricket. So I'm just hoping that this is the time, after about 30 odd years, that we're going to go to New Zealand and win the series.
It's 25 years, and
25.
So you're right. It's been quite some time. The last time, of course, was under the captaincy of Courtney Walsh, when he took 13 wickets in that test match at Wellington. But you're right. I mean, it's not unknown for the opposition at home to make it easy for the visiting team to lure them into that false sense of security and to present a very different challenge when the actual international or the test match comes around. So, but having said that, and having put all of that into the consideration, I think it's better than anything to have your players scoring runs than scratching about and struggling and so on. So it's really up to the players to take advantage of the opportunity. Jermaine Blackwood resumes this evening our time, so you need him to get runs under his belt as well to put some pressure to retain his place in the middle order. And that's what you want to see. Everyone capitalizing, and then the bowlers who will certainly have their work cut out because they struggled in the 3-day match. And let's see how they fare in the 4-day fixture.
Fazir, John Campbell is somebody, I've been a bit harsh about, especially because, I feel like I expect a lot of him. And his position, I always say, I would have put Shea Hope in place of John Campbell. Do you think that start that he got today, 45, will it help him, moving forward? Will it propel him to do better? Is it a sign of something to come? I can keep going on and on with these questions.
It's probably too early to say because 45 runs is a start, but then he didn't carry on, and that will all be a consideration. And even in those few highlights that we saw, again, it's just highlights, so we need to put it in perspective. Runs off the outside edge down towards third man. When you go into a test match, there's probably going to be a third slip there or a gully early on with the extra pace that you're going to get from a Trent Bolt and whoever else is sharing the new ball with him. So all of these factors you have to take into consideration. And yes, it's important that he gets runs. And no, I don't think you've been exceptionally harsh. I think many people feel he's very lucky, including myself, that he is on the tour of New Zealand because he didn't really do anything much to talk about in the tour of England. And Shea Hope has been left at home. Campbell has made the trip, maybe because there's a real absence of any genuine contenders for the opening spot. But having said all of that, it's up to him to take advantage of the situation now.
What should be the goal for the West Indies, from here? Right now they're batting, they're in the warm-up matches. What should be their goal?
I would think batting, because this is a 4-day match. It's not a 3-day match as with the previous one, where you may want to give your bowlers a good workout. We saw New Zealand declaring at the end of the first day of that 3-day fixture. This time around, though, I would expect the West Indies to really try and bat on to give the recognized batsmen every opportunity to get some runs under their belts, get some confidence, at least those who they have in mind for that first test match, and then give their bowlers a really good workout. And if it is that the New Zealand A batsmen are anywhere as prolific and resistant as we saw in that first fixture, then it's really going to be a workout for the bowlers. You don't want them to tire themselves out or to break down. Players who might be susceptible to injury, like a Shannon Gabriel, for example, you don't want them to suffer an injury so close to a test series, but it's important that they're able to get some overs under their belts.
Okay, thanks, Faz. We'll be sticking with you because in the next segment we'll be talking about the T20 International Series that starts early in the morning Caribbean time, as well as the Dre Russ story. At the moment, the West Indies adding 11 to their overnight score. They're now 314, I think, 367 for 3. And Craig Brathwaite has moved on to 184, still batting. Back with more on the zone after this.
The SportsMax Zone. Hard-hitting Windies batsman Dre Russ has once again created a stir with his latest snub of the West Indies team in preference for T20 franchise cricket. The 32-year-old Russell had declined the Windies' offer to partake in the current New Zealand tour, stating that he needed time to clear his head as he was going from one lockdown tournament to another. However, the two-time Indian Premier League MVP suited up earlier Thursday for the Colombo Kings against the Kandy Tuskers in the Lanka Premier League's opening game. Russell's impact with the bat was notable as the Kings secured a narrow victory in a super over. The Jamaican made 24 from 13 deliveries in regular play as the Kings scored 219 for 7 to send the match into the super over. He then made 8 from 4 deliveries in his side's score of 16 before they restricted the Tuskers to 12. Now last week, West Indies Chief of Selectors Roger Harper was asked about Russell's decision to go to Sri Lanka while the Windies played against New Zealand in a T20 series. This is what he said. Dre said that he needed some time to clear his head. He's free to make those decisions. We will look to see what the situation is. how it develops, and take it from there. What I will say is that it gives a younger player an opportunity, and hopefully that player can make the most out of it and really do us proud. Well, Fazir Mohammed is still with us as we discuss this touchy Dre Russ situation, plus preview the Windies T20 series against New Zealand, which starts early Friday morning. So Faz, I put that to you now. How have you viewed this Dre Russ situation?
It doesn't look good, and especially when you have your coach Phil Simmons saying, well, it's news to me that he's in Sri Lanka, or you hear Roger Harper, and you know with Roger, you always have to read between the lines. He's basically saying this is a chance for maybe a Rodman Powell or some other player to step up and really play beautifully and brilliantly, and who knows, there might not be a discussion anymore about Andre Russell. Then you've got, on the Cricket West Indies side, they've got to balance things as well, because as Johnny Graves said, quite frankly, they are not going to deny any player an NOC. They're not going to prevent them from earning a living playing in these franchise tournaments, even if it looks bad that they might have been required for the West Indies. They said no initially, they said they were going there, they said they're not going, that is to Sri Lanka, and then they end up there and will be playing today. So as I said, it's not a good look, but it's something that clearly requires a lot more discussion, a lot more understanding, because at the end of the day, it leaves the impression that players are prioritizing these franchise formats and prioritizing the big bucks that they may earn. Granted, 50,000 US might be big bucks for all of us, but won't be that big a deal for someone like an Andre Russell who earned almost $1 million US in the IPL. But it's the principle, it's the point that you at least want to be seen to have a clear understanding as to where these players stand in relation to priorities for the West Indies and priorities with these franchises.
What message does this act of Andre Russell send to the younger West Indies players looking on? And do you see this becoming a norm?
Well, it's been a norm for quite some time, Mariah, because we've had this situation for years with Sunil Narain, occasionally with Karen Pollard, Dwayne Bravo, even Andre Russell as well. And again, we need to take it back even further than that for another 40 years. Remember, all of our greatest names of the most dominant era were in Australia playing Kerry Packer World Series cricket, when the official West Indies team were in India playing a 6-match test series. So, and again, that was a time when the players, for similar, maybe not the exact circumstances, but the principle was the same. The revenue was very attractive playing for Kerry Packer's World Series cricket, and they opted not to represent the West Indies in an official test series. So again, we've had these situations over the years. Now it's becoming the norm. The Kerry Packer thing was just 2.5 years. The Rebel tours to South Africa were just 2 years. This is the new normal when we talk about international cricket. It's been that way for at least a decade, and it's a difficult balancing act for both the player and for Cricket West Indies.
Faz, are we being fair when we said, when we put in so much pressure on Andre Russell, for example, for making this decision? You just said just now that it's a decision between West Indies or the franchise. I don't necessarily think it's looked at that way from the player's perspective. I think there says the difference between West Indies and themselves, and therefore they want to ensure, particularly looking at Russell ambling around, he's struggling with his knees and so on, and therefore his game in his position in world cricket is basically very limited, based on the fact that he has been struggling so badly with his knees. And if he wants to go out there and ensure that he has a bright future for himself and his family, so he wants to cash in on every dollar that is possible out there for him to make. Are we being fair by almost saying to him that he's not, dedicated and don't want to make sacrifice for West Indies cricket when he's really trying to protect himself for the rest of his life?
And that's a fair point, Wayne, and no argument with that about a player recognizing that, look, every sportsman or woman has a limited shelf life, and you've got to ensure that you can maximize your earning capacity for yourself, for your family, for your long-term livelihood, and so on. But then he was the one who said that he was unavailable because he needed to clear his head and he needed to get away from this bubble environment. But then he's gone off to play in Sri Lanka, which is another bubble. So again, that is where the complication comes in. And you talk about pressure, Wayne, and again, this comes with the territory. When you are playing at the highest level, you talked and you lamented at the start of the show about the passing of the great Diego Maradona. You live with that sort of pressure. You live with that weight of expectation everywhere you go. So if you don't want to be analyzed and maybe criticized and second guessed and so on will then drop out of the game, because so long as you're playing and so long as you're seen as someone of influence with either the West Indies or a franchise and so on, there will always be a comment, positive or negative.
Yeah, well, obviously, the issue here is that the West Indies goes into the T20 opener on Friday morning Caribbean time without Dre Russell. And the team looks pretty solid. Many of the players coming right out of the IPL, which means that they should be, as far as T20 cricket is concerned, match sharp and ready for action, having come up with COVID-19 negative tests, Paz.
Yeah, that was the most important thing, because we see Pakistan on the verge of probably being sent back from New Zealand because 6 of their players have tested positive and they've got a final warning. But yeah, I expect the West Indies to be competitive, because this is very much our game. A few key players might be missing, and Andrew Russell being one of them, no Chris Gayle and a few others. Concerns about the fitness of a Dwayne Bravo, that's going to be a consideration as well. A few of the players would have only just come out of the quarantine situation. New Zealand resting Trent Bolt and a few others. And that's another consideration, Lance, which we talked about previously, that international cricket is now becoming so congested with all these franchises that now you often wonder, outside of ICC tournaments, are we ever going to see the best 11 on the field for any country? But again, to answer your specific question, I expect the West Indies to be very competitive, and specifically as well, because players will see this as an opportunity to really show their worth, to displace some of the established players, even Andre Russell, ahead of the World T20.
Thanks, Faz. As usual, always a pleasure talking to you. Some great cricket action coming up on the home of champions over the next 24 hours, starting with the first one-day international between Australia and India from the Sydney Cricket Ground. That's 10:40 tonight, 11:40 Eastern Caribbean time. And following that, there is T20 action from the Lanka Premier League. 2 matches coming up on Friday, 9:30 a.m., 10:30 opening game between Gull Gladiators with the Jamaican Chadwick Walton taking on the Jaffna Stallions with the St. Lucian Johnson Charles. Be sure to catch the action there. And when we return, we'll be at the track.